Have you ever wondered what it takes for an entire country to just snap? For people to get so fed up that they decide to rise up and overthrow their own king. It's a huge question, and today we're going to get into it by exploring the French Revolution. And that's really the question, isn't it? Why were people so incredibly angry? This wasn't just some small disagreement. We're talking about a deep, simmering rage that was about to boil over. So, let's figure out where all that anger came from.
See, the first thing you need to get is that this anger didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, it was a slow burn, and its roots were buried deep in the very structure of French society, a society that was broken and frankly completely unfair.
To really get a handle on this broken society, you only need to know one word: estates. Before the Revolution, everybody in France was shoved into one of three social classes, or estates, and whichever one you were born into, well, that basically decided your entire life.
Okay, so this right here shows you the whole problem in a nutshell. On one side, you had the first and second estates. Think clergy, nobility, the fancy folks. They had all the luxuries, all the power, and, get this, they paid zero taxes, nothing. Then you have the other side, the third estate, basically everyone else. They had no privileges, but they carried all the burdens, including paying every single tax that kept the whole system running.
And this chart just drives home how nuts the whole situation was. Look at that tiny little sliver of the population, the privileged few who had everything. And then look at that huge chunk of the pie. That's the third estate, the vast majority of the people. I mean, a system this lopsided is basically a pressure cooker, just waiting to explode.
So, you've got this society stretched to its absolute breaking point. It just needed one last push to send it right over the edge. The injustice that had been simmering for so long was finally about to boil over.
And what was that final push? It came down to the most basic thing you can imagine: food. For the average person, bread wasn't a side dish, it was what they ate to survive. So when the price of bread suddenly went through the roof, it meant people couldn't feed their families. People were literally starving, while the king and the nobles were still living it up.
You can just feel the raw emotion here, can't you? It wasn't about politics or taxes anymore. This was a cry from the heart. It was personal. It was a feeling of profound, absolute unfairness.
All of that pressure, all that anger and desperation, it was a powder keg, and all it needed was a single spark to set the whole thing off. That spark turned into an inferno, a defiant act that would become a symbol of rebellion for the entire world.
And that spark ignited on a date that changed history forever, July 14th, 1789. This was the day the people of Paris finally said, enough is enough, and they stormed a fortress called the Bastille. Now you gotta understand, the Bastille wasn't just some old prison. It was this huge, terrifying symbol of the king's absolute and oppressive power. So when the people tore it down, they weren't just freeing a few prisoners. They were physically destroying the very idea of a king who could do whatever he wanted. This was it. There was no going back.
And out of the rubble of that old oppressive world, something new and incredibly powerful began to grow. A set of ideas that would not only reshape France, but would echo across the entire globe.
This new beginning was made official with a document that was a total game changer, the Declaration of the Rights of Man. It laid out this radical idea that rights don't come from a king, they belong to every single person just because they're human.
And at the heart of it all were these three incredible words. First, liberty, the freedom to live without a king breathing down your neck. Second, equality, this crazy idea that everyone is equal under the law, no matter who their parents were. And finally, fraternity, this new sense of togetherness, that people weren't just subjects, but they were citizens of one nation.
And that really brings us to the final takeaway here. Hundreds of years later, those three ideals, liberty, equality, fraternity, born out of hunger and anger and a desperate cry for fairness, are still the foundation for democracies all around the world. It just goes to show you that sometimes a fight against injustice can give us ideas that are truly timeless.